Germany, once a powerhouse racing toward modernity, shattered overnight, humiliated by defeat, forced to accept crippling terms at Versailles, and soon racked by chaos no one could control. In this climate of resentment and despair, a failed Austrian art student named Adolf Hitler, wounded in the war, decorated with the Iron Cross, found his voice in the ruins. Before Hitler's name became synonymous with terror, he was the product of forces few truly recognized, until it was far too late. So how did instability forge a movement that would change the world forever? Adolf Hitler was born on April the 20th, 1889, in the small Austrian border town of Braunau am Inn. His father, Alois, worked as a mid-level customs official, a man known for his short temper and rigid discipline. Alois expected obedience at home and had little patience for his son's ambitions. Hitler's mother, Clara, offered a gentler presence. She was deeply devoted, shielding her son from his father's harshness and nurturing a bond that would shape his emotional world. As a child, Hitler struggled to meet his father's expectations. Alois wanted his son to become a civil servant, but Adolf dreamed of being an artist. When Alois enrolled him at the Realschule in Linz in 1900, Hitler's grades faltered. He later admitted to sabotaging his own studies, hoping poor performance would convince his father to let him pursue art. The death of his younger brother Edmund in 1900, when Adolf was just 11, left a mark, turning a once lively boy into a withdrawn, solitary figure. Alois died in 1903, and after a few more years of lackluster schooling, Hitler left formal education behind in 1905. With his father's shadow gone, Hitler convinced his mother to let him try for the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. In 1907, he set out for Vienna, carrying his mother's hopes and the remnants of his inheritance. The city was a center of culture and politics, alive with new ideas and sharp divisions. But when Hitler submitted his portfolio to the Academy, the verdict was swift. His drawings showed some skill, especially in architecture, but his work with human figures was lacking. He was rejected. The blow was severe. He tried again the following year, only to be turned away once more. His mother, already gravely ill with cancer, died that December. For Hitler, Vienna became a city of loss and disappointment. Struggling to survive, he moved from one cheap lodging to another, at times living in men's hostels and selling small paintings and postcards to scrape by. Vienna's streets exposed him to poverty, but also to a swirl of political currents. The city was a patchwork of ethnic groups, Germans, Czechs, Jews, and others, competing for space and influence. Politicians like Mayor Karl Lueger wielded anti-Semitic rhetoric to win votes, while radical nationalists called for a pure German Austria. Hitler spent hours in libraries reading newspapers that stoked fears about immigrants and Jews. He listened to fiery speeches in cafes, absorbing ideas that would later resurface in his own worldview. The rejection from the Art Academy left him with a growing sense of grievance. He blamed his failures on forces beyond his control, channeling his frustrations into resentment and suspicion. Vienna's climate of prejudice and political agitation provided fertile ground for these feelings. By 1913, with little to show for his years in the city, Hitler decided to leave Vienna behind. He moved to Munich, carrying with him a deepening bitterness and a belief that he belonged elsewhere. This search for belonging and for someone to blame would follow him into the storm that was about to engulf Europe. August 1914, Munich. Adolf Hitler, a 25-year-old Austrian living in Germany, volunteers for the Bavarian army as war fever sweeps the city. He is assigned to the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment, known as the List Regiment, after its first commander. The regiment is sent straight to the Western Front, thrown into the chaos of the First Battle of Ypres. Within weeks, nearly 3/4 of the regiment are killed or wounded. Hitler survives, but his company is reduced from 250 men to just 42. He is selected for duty as a regimental runner, a job that demands nerves and stamina. Runners carry messages between headquarters and battalions, crossing shell-blasted ground under fire, dodging gas and shrapnel. The role keeps him close to command posts, never far from danger, but not in the front trench. Over 4 years, Hitler delivers orders through barrages and night raids, sometimes crawling for hours to avoid machine gun fire. He earns a reputation for reliability, but also stands apart from the tight-knit camaraderie of the front-line troops. Many see him as a loner, more at home with headquarters staff than with the men in the mud. The regiment fights at Neuve-Chapelle, Fromelles and Arras. Hitler is wounded in the thigh by shell fragments in October 1916 and spends 2 months recovering in a hospital at Belitz, south of Berlin. He returns to the regiment in March 1917 as the war grinds on. By 1918, the List Regiment is battered, but still in the line. On August 4, 1918, Hitler is awarded the Iron Cross First Class, a rare honor for a corporal, recommended by Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann, a Jewish officer. The medal is pinned on by Major von Tubeuf near Soissons. Hitler wears it for the rest of his life. October 13, 1918, near Ypres. British forces launch a gas attack using mustard and phosgene. Hitler and several comrades are caught in the cloud. His eyes burn. He is blinded and stumbles back to the rear. He is evacuated to Pasewalk Hospital in Pomerania, where he spends weeks recovering in darkness. News of Germany's surrender reaches him there. For Hitler, the war ends not with glory, but with defeat and humiliation. He leaves the hospital in November, discharged into a country in turmoil, stripped of purpose, but carrying the wounds and medals of a survivor. The war, with its discipline, violence, and sense of belonging, becomes the defining experience of his early adulthood. It leaves him hardened, restless, and searching for meaning in a shattered world. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June 1919, struck Germany with a series of humiliations that would haunt the country for years. Article 231, the so-called War Guilt Clause, forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for the outbreak of World War I. This clause was more than a legal statement. It became a national wound. The treaty demanded that Germany surrender 13% of its territory, including Alsace-Lorraine to France, Eupen-Malmedy to Belgium, and large parts of Prussia and Silesia to Poland. Millions of Germans found themselves living under foreign rule almost overnight. The army was reduced to 100,000 men. Conscription was banned, and the navy was limited to a handful of small ships. Germany was forbidden from having an air force, and the Rhineland was demilitarized and occupied by Allied troops. The most punishing term came in the form of reparations. In May 1921, the London Schedule set the bill at 50 billion gold marks, a sum so vast it seemed designed to break the country. The payments were to be made partly in goods, coal, timber, and partly in hard currency. But the treaty left the final total open-ended, creating a sense of endless debt. For many Germans, this felt like a sentence without hope of parole. The burden of reparations layered on top of war debt and the need to rebuild shattered towns and industries led to a financial crisis that the Weimar government could not control. When Germany fell behind on payments, French and Belgian troops marched into the Ruhr in January 1923. The Ruhr was Germany's industrial heartland, home to coal mines and steel works. In response, the German government called for passive resistance. A general strike. Factories shut down, trains stopped running, but the workers still needed to be paid, so the government printed more and more banknotes to cover the costs. By late 1923, the German mark was worthless. Prices doubled every few days. Families carried wages home in baskets. Savings that had taken a lifetime to build vanished in weeks. Pensioners and the middle class, in particular, saw everything they had worked for evaporate. The chaos of hyperinflation reached its peak in November 1923, when the mark collapsed to 4.2 trillion to the dollar. Food riots broke out in the cities. Shopkeepers refused to accept paper money. People bartered for bread and coal. The trauma ran deep, especially for those who had already lost sons and brothers in the trenches. For many, democracy seemed powerless in the face of disaster. The old order had failed, but the new one offered only confusion and hunger. In this climate, anger and suspicion spread. Many Germans refused to believe their army had been defeated in the field. Instead, they clung to the Dolchstoßlegende, the stab-in-the-back myth, which claimed that traitors at home, especially socialists and Jews, had betrayed a still strong military. This story found eager listeners in beer halls and veterans clubs. It offered a simple answer to complex problems, and it gave a face to the nation's pain. As the mark crumbled and the streets filled with unemployed men, voices calling for a savior grew louder. Radical parties recruited easily among those who had lost faith in Weimar's promises. The sense of national humiliation, fueled by economic ruin and territorial loss, became a powerful force waiting for someone to harness it. Army Headquarters in Munich, 1919. Adolf Hitler, still in uniform, receives a new assignment from his superiors. Infiltrate the German Workers' Party, a fringe group meeting in beer halls and back rooms. The army wants eyes on every radical faction in the city, especially those with anti-Bolshevik slogans and a taste for conspiracy. Hitler attends a meeting at the Sternecker Brau on September 12th, listening quietly as Anton Drexler and Gottfried Feder debate currency reform and national renewal. The crowd is small, restless. A visitor stands up, arguing for Bavarian independence. Hitler interrupts, his voice sharp, his words gathering force. The room falls silent. Drexler is impressed. He presses a party pamphlet into Hitler's hand and urges him to come back. Within days, Hitler hands in his army report, but instead of moving on, he fills out a membership card. He becomes member number 555, though the party starts counting at 500 to look bigger than it is. The DAP is little more than a debating club with no clear direction. Meetings draw a handful of men, veterans, workers, and the disillusioned. Hitler's first speech as a party member comes on October 16, 1919, at the Hofbräukeller. He stands before 111 people, nervous but determined. His words cut through the haze of cigarette smoke, denouncing the Treaty of Versailles, blaming Marxists and financiers for Germany's misery, promising a new path. The effect is immediate. Drexler names him propaganda chief. Hitler starts organizing bigger meetings, printing handbills, and plastering Munich with posters. The message is always the same: Germany humiliated, betrayed, and in need of a savior. By early 1920, Hitler is no longer just an observer. He's the party's main draw, the man who can fill a hall and whip up a crowd. The DAP's executive committee meets in February, debating a new name. Rudolf Jung, a Bohemian school inspector, pushes for National Socialist. Hitler resists at first, but the committee prevails. On February 24th, the party unveils its new identity: National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, NSDAP. That night, at the Staatliches Hofbräuhaus, Hitler addresses more than 2,000 people, presenting the party's 25-point program. The manifesto calls for the abolition of the Versailles Treaty, the unification of all Germans, and the exclusion of Jews from citizenship. The crowd roars its approval. Karl Harrer, one of the founders, resigns in protest. But Hitler's vision is now at the center. Membership grows, slowly at first. Hitler's speeches draw new faces, men looking for answers, for someone to blame, for a sense of belonging. The party's meetings become more organized, with stewards at the doors and handbills promising passionate debate. The army, satisfied that Hitler is no Bolshevik, lets him go. He trades his uniform for a civilian suit and spends his days writing leaflets, planning rallies, and practicing his delivery. The NSDAP is still just one of dozens of radical groups in Munich, but Hitler is turning it into something new. A political vehicle built on spectacle, repetition, and resentment. What began as an army assignment has become his life's work. May 1920, Munich. A new flag appears above the crowd, a red field, a white disc, and a black swastika at the center. The design comes from Dr. Friedrich Krohn, a dentist and Thule Society member. But Adolf Hitler insists on refinements. He adjusts the proportions, tilts the swastika for energy, and links the colors to a vision: red for social renewal, white for national unity, black for Aryan struggle. The flag's sharp contrast stands out against the grey streets and faded banners of Weimar politics. For the first time, the Nazi Party has a symbol that's instantly recognizable anywhere in Germany. The swastika is more than a logo. It's a rallying point for the movement's earliest followers, men who will become Hitler's inner circle. Rudolf Hess, a former infantryman with a knack for organization, serves as Hitler's private secretary and loyal deputy. Hermann Göring, the decorated fighter ace, brings the glamour of the air war and a taste for the dramatic. Heinrich Himmler, methodical and ambitious, joins as a minor functionary, but soon builds a network that will reach deep into every corner of German society. Joseph Goebbels, a failed writer with a sharp tongue, turns local meetings into mass spectacles and hones the party's message for the radio age. Each man brings something different. Hess, discipline; Göring, connections; Himmler, bureaucracy; Goebbels, propaganda. The party's meetings grow in size and spectacle. Uniformed stewards, brown shirts, keep order at the doors, their presence a warning to hecklers and rivals. The Essay, or Sturmabteilung, emerges from these crowds. What began as a handful of brawlers becomes a disciplined body of street fighters, ready to defend the party and intimidate opponents. Their brown uniforms, borrowed from colonial surplus, become a badge of loyalty. Hitler makes sure every detail sends a message. The swastika armband, the banners draped from balconies, the torchlit processions, all reinforce the sense of destiny and belonging. Inside the beer halls, the atmosphere is electric. Goebbels perfects the art of the rally. Banners hang from the rafters, spotlights sweep the crowd. The party's anthem blares from a scratchy phonograph. Hitler enters last, greeted by a sea of outstretched arms. The choreography is deliberate, designed to create unity and awe. Goebbels calls it political theater, and the formula works. Young men and veterans, shopkeepers and clerks, all swept up in the spectacle. The party's new identity is more than visual. The inner circle works behind the scenes to build a structure that can outlast the chaos of the streets. Hess manages Hitler's schedule and correspondence, keeping the leader above the daily fray. Göring courts conservative elites and military men, lending the movement respectability. Himmler drafts membership rolls and plans for a party within the party. Goebbels launches a newspaper, Der Angriff, to spread the message beyond Munich. Each man carves out a domain, but all answer to Hitler. By the summer of 1922, the Nazi flag flies at rallies across Bavaria. The swastika becomes a shorthand for the movement's promise: order, renewal, revenge. The party's inner circle, ambitious, ruthless, and fiercely loyal, gives Hitler the tools to transform spectacle into strategy. With a symbol that commands attention and a team ready for action, the party is no longer a debating club. It's a force ready to gamble for power. November 8, 1923, Munich's Bürger Braukeller is packed with Bavarian officials and a restless crowd. At 8:30 p.m., Hitler storms in with 600 armed SA men. He fires a pistol into the ceiling, climbs onto a chair, and shouts that the national revolution has begun. The hall is locked down. Gustav von Kahr, General von Lossow, and Colonel von Seisser, Bavaria's ruling triumvirate, are hustled at gunpoint into a side room. Hitler demands their support for a march on Berlin. General Ludendorff, hero of the Great War, stands with him, hoping his name will rally the army. For a tense hour, the officials appear to yield. But as night drags on, it becomes clear their promises are empty. Outside, Munich is tense. Rumors swirl. Hitler leaves the beer hall to coordinate with his followers, leaving Ludendorff in charge of the hostages. The triumvirate soon escape. By dawn, they're broadcasting orders to crush the uprising. Police and army units mobilize. Hitler's plan unravels. Morning, November the 9th. Hitler and Ludendorff gather about 2,000 supporters and set out for the city centre. Their aim: seize the war ministry and rally the garrison. The marchers carry swastika banners and wear party armbands, an improvised army in brown shirts and civilian coats. At the Odeonsplatz, they meet a line of armed police. For a moment, both sides hesitate. Then shots ring out. 16 Nazis and 4 police officers fall. Hitler is thrown to the pavement, dislocating his shoulder. Ludendorff walks straight into police custody. The crowd scatters. Göring, wounded in the thigh, is carried away. Within hours, the putsch is over. Hitler flees, hiding in a friend's attic outside Munich. The crackdown is swift. The Nazi Party is banned, its leaders arrested. Hitler is captured on November 11th and charged with high treason, a crime that could mean years in prison, or worse. But when the trial opens in February 1924, the atmosphere is anything but hostile. The court, headed by Judge Neithardt, treats Hitler and his co-defendants with surprising respect. Ludendorff is addressed as Your Excellency. The lay judges are so sympathetic they have to be warned against outright acquittal. Hitler seizes the moment. Over 4 weeks, he turns the courtroom into a stage. His opening statement runs nearly 40 hours, weaving his life story into a vision for Germany's rebirth. He claims full responsibility for the putsch, casting himself as a patriot defending the nation against betrayal and humiliation. He rails against the Treaty of Versailles, the Weimar politicians, and the November criminals. The press hangs on every word. Newspapers across Germany publish his speeches in full. The trial, meant to bury his movement, makes him a national figure. On April 1st, 1924, the verdict lands. Hitler is sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg Fortress, the lightest sentence possible. It's not a prison in the usual sense. There's no forced labor. Visitors come and go, and Hitler is allowed to write and receive letters. He serves just 8 months. The authorities call it fortress confinement, a privilege reserved for those judged to have acted from noble motives. In his cell, Hitler dictates the first volume of Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess. The book mixes autobiography with ideology, laying out his blueprint for Germany's future. A racist vision, a call for Lebensraum in the East, and a strategy for winning power through propaganda and mass mobilization. He studies the lessons of failure. The putsch, he concludes, was premature. The movement must go legal, fight elections, build a mass base, and use the system to destroy the system. Meanwhile, the Nazi Party is banned. Hitler's speaking ban in Bavaria silences his most potent weapon. The movement splinters. Some drift away. Others keep the flame alive underground. But the myth of martyrdom takes root. The 16 dead from the Odeonsplatz are honored as fallen heroes. The failed coup becomes a rallying point, a story of sacrifice and betrayal that binds the faithful together. Hitler emerges from Landsberg not as a defeated rebel, but as the self-anointed leader of a growing legend, ready to trade bullets for ballots. By early 1924, the Nazi Party lay in ruins, banned by the authorities, its leaders scattered, and Hitler himself barred from public speaking in Bavaria. Yet behind the scenes, the machinery of the movement was being rebuilt. The Dawes Plan, signed in August 1924, brought a measure of stability to Germany's battered economy. American loans flowed in, the mark was stabilized, and for a few years the Weimar Republic seemed to find its footing. But the calm was deceptive. Hitler, released from Landsberg prison after just 8 months, emerged with a new playbook. He had dictated Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess, laying out not just his vision for Germany, but a blueprint for how to win power, not by force, but by working within the system. The failed putsch had shown that violence alone would not topple the Republic. From now on, the plan was to build a mass movement, fight elections, and use the tools of democracy to destroy it from within. Rebuilding began in the shadows. The Nazi Party was refounded in Munich in February 1925. Hitler quickly reasserted his leadership, demanding absolute loyalty and sidelining rivals. The party's structure was overhauled. Instead of a loose federation, it became a tightly controlled machine, with Hitler at the top and a network of Gauleiters, district leaders, spreading out across Germany. Each Gauleiter was responsible for a specific region, reporting directly to Munich. This new system allowed the party to expand far beyond Bavaria, reaching into Prussia, Saxony, and the Protestant north. The party's old reliance on Munich street brawlers gave way to a disciplined organization, ready to compete in elections and infiltrate local councils. The years from 1925 to 1929 saw the Nazis focus on rural Germany. While big cities like Berlin and Hamburg remained strongholds of the left, the party made inroads among small farmers, craftsmen, and shopkeepers, people who still felt the sting of hyperinflation and who distrusted the cosmopolitan culture of the Weimar years. Party newspapers multiplied. Local branches sprang up in market towns and villages, each one a foothold for Nazi propaganda. The message was tailored to local grievances, resentment of reparations, fear of communism, anger at falling farm prices. Goebbels, now party leader in Berlin, honed the art of political theater. He flooded the capital with leaflets and posters, staged rallies that drew thousands, and used radio broadcasts to reach new audiences. Even as the party struggled for votes, its propaganda machine never stopped working. The Nazi Party's legal status was restored, but Hitler's power in Bavaria remained checked. After his inflammatory speech in February 1925, the Bavarian government imposed a 2-year speaking ban. For Hitler, this was a severe blow. His oratory had been the party's greatest weapon. Now, others had to step in. Goebbels, Hess, and the regional Gauleiters took the stage, keeping the movement alive with rallies, pamphlets, and local agitation. The ban forced the party to develop a more sophisticated organizational apparatus, one that relied less on Hitler's personal charisma and more on a network of loyal deputies. This period of enforced silence became a crucible for the party's future leaders, testing their loyalty and sharpening their skills. Despite the ban, the Nazis continued to grow. By 1928, party membership had climbed to over 100,000. The SA, reorganized and expanded under Ernst Röhm, provided muscle at rallies and a sense of discipline on the streets. The party's electoral results remained modest, just 2.6% in the 1928 Reichstag elections. But the groundwork was being laid. The Gauleiter system, the rural branches, the propaganda techniques refined by Goebbels, all these would soon prove invaluable. The party's reach extended into youth groups, women's organizations, and professional associations. By the time the speaking ban was lifted in 1927, Hitler returned to a movement that was leaner, more disciplined, and ready to seize any opportunity the future might bring. For now, Germany was stable, but the party was poised, waiting for the next crisis to open the door. October 1929. The Wall Street crash sends shockwaves across the Atlantic, and Germany's fragile recovery collapses almost overnight. American loans, lifelines for factories and banks, are called in. Businesses shut their doors. By the end of 1932, nearly 7 million Germans are out of work. Men line up at soup kitchens in Berlin and Hamburg. Families pawn their last valuables for bread. The middle class, already scarred by the hyperinflation of 1923, now faces ruin once again. Savings evaporate. Pensions dwindle to nothing. For many, faith in the Weimar system dies on the streets. In the Reichstag, Chancellor Heinrich Brüning responds with austerity. He slashes welfare, cuts wages, and raises taxes to balance the budget. The government, paralyzed by deadlock, rules by emergency decree. Social spending drops by a third. Health clinics close. Unemployment benefits shrink as the jobless rolls swell. Brüning believes this pain is necessary to stabilize the mark, but each new decree breeds more resentment. Shopkeepers, clerks, and war veterans, once pillars of order, now drift toward the extremes. The Nazis seize the moment. Their message, once confined to rural Bavaria, now echoes across the nation. Joseph Goebbels orchestrates a relentless propaganda campaign. Posters on every corner, rallies in every town, Hitler's speeches broadcast to packed halls. The party's brown shirts, the SA, clash with communists in the streets. Violence becomes routine. Brawls outside polling stations, windows smashed on election night. The police, outnumbered and demoralized, struggle to keep order. For many Germans, it feels as if the Republic is coming apart. The electoral breakthrough comes in September 1930. The Nazis leap from 2.6% of the vote to 18.3%. Their Reichstag delegation swells from 12 to 107 seats. Hitler, once a regional curiosity, now leads the second largest party in parliament. Newspapers across Europe take notice. Supporters hail him as Germany's last hope, opponents as a threat to everything left of the center. The party's membership surges, 130,000 by the end of the year, with new recruits pouring in from every corner of society. The SA, emboldened by political success, grows more aggressive. Paramilitary marches fill the streets. Uniformed men chant slogans beneath swastika banners. The crisis deepens in 1932. Unemployment peaks at 30%. Brüning's government, unable to form a majority, collapses. Elections come in rapid succession. In July, the Nazis win 37.3% of the vote, over 13 million ballots, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. Hitler's face appears everywhere, on posters, in shop windows, in the illustrated press. He flies from city to city, staging rallies in stadiums and market squares. His speeches blend promises of national renewal with scorn for the old order. The party's message, work, bread, order, lands with desperate force. Behind the scenes, conservative elites begin to court Hitler. Former chancellors, generals, and industrialists meet in private rooms, searching for a way to harness the Nazis' popularity without surrendering control. Hitler, emboldened by the numbers, refuses to be anyone's pawn. He demands the chancellorship, confident that only he can command the loyalty of millions. The center cannot hold. The Social Democrats and Communists, bitter rivals, refuse to unite. Parliamentary government grinds to a halt. Violence and uncertainty become the new normal. By the end of 1932, the Nazi Party stands at the threshold of power. The Republic's institutions, parliament, courts, police, are battered and exhausted. The old guard, convinced they can manage Hitler, opens the door. The man who once shouted from Munich beer halls now waits in Berlin, poised to take the reins of a country desperate for rescue. The collapse of the Weimar economy has delivered him to the gates of power, carried by a tide of anger, fear, and hope for something, anything, different. By July 1932, the Nazi Party had secured 37.3% of the German vote, up from just 2.6% in 1928. This surge was not sudden. It was built on years of economic crisis, national humiliation after the Treaty of Versailles, and the relentless use of propaganda and mass rallies, as shown in party records and contemporary film. What is clear? Economic collapse and social unrest created an opening for extremist movements, a pattern documented across multiple countries in the same era. The rise of Hitler stands as a factual reminder that democratic institutions, when shaken by crisis and exploited by radical messaging, can be rapidly undermined. The evidence leaves no doubt. The path to power was paved with exploited grievances, disciplined organization, and the calculated use of fear.